Boxing has a significant history. Many iconic figures have reached mythic status, and some struggles have become legends.
Mitch could stop the fight, but Cote is still throwing punches.
But for these legends to exist, they need to be narrated. Well, today we're pulling a slightly dusty classic off the shelves. Loyal sports fans are sure to appreciate and perhaps find out something new for themselves. So here's a blockbuster documentary series about brutal, absolutely no compromise battles. Just sit back. We're ready to begin.
It's a street fight in Las Vegas.
Let's go back to 1983, to the famous Madison Square Garden Arena in New York City. On June 16th, Roberto Duran turned 32 years old. On his birthday, the legendary Panamanian fighter fought for the title in the third weight class. His opponent was undefeated 24-year-old American Davey Moore, defending the WBA light welterweight belt. Roberto was the man for whom the 20,000-seat Madison Square was packed to capacity. Although from the point of view of analysts, the legendary Duran was considered easy prey for the young lion Davey Moore, who had no defeats and simply ripped his last opponents to shreds. But Duran was not embarrassed by his underdog status. He made it clear that he was not going to be a stepping stone for a young rival. Moore didn't want to spare the old fighter either. When the rivals clashed at the end of the starting round, the crowd went wild. Experienced fans understood, a diamond cuts a diamond. This means that the fight will last until one of them is completely destroyed. However, everyone was wondering about Duran's physical condition. In those days, championship fights lasted 15 rounds, and there was no doubt about Moore's stamina. The second round was the real action. Duran's punches sent the champion flying to the ropes. From that point on, the match turned into a slugfest. The challenger applied active pressure and got his opponent with a liver punch. At the end of the round, Davey Moore countered with 3 solid punches. Round number 3 began with a clear attack from Duran. Afterwards, the Panamanian took full control of the action. He emphasized his attacks with body shots. One can only imagine how Moore felt as hands of stone bombed his body. In the next round, however, the American didn't stay in debt. Davey controlled the jab and realized several combinations. The 5th round was as dramatic as possible. Duran was becoming a ruthless predator. He ripped a piece off his rival with every punch, robbing him of his strength. Roberto's attacks were varied, but also 60% of his punches were to the body. It worked, as Davey Moore began to resemble a slow-moving zombie. For a moment, the champion recovered and threw a nice long combo. Both were trying to seize the initiative. By this point, all suspicion about Duran's physical shape and motivation vanished. In the 7th round, the champion was already being dismantled for spare parts. As if wound up, Duran was picking up the fight pace. To Moore's credit, he was fighting like a man and still firing back. His character wouldn't let him throw in the towel. To convey the wild ambiance of what was going on, we'll leave the end of the round without comment. the bell, Duran was a bit confused and sat down in the opposite corner. The secondants had to take him away. Round 8 was the final round. During this time, poor Davey Moore suffered a serious beating from Hands of Stone. All experts rightly reproached referee Ernesto Magana for irresponsibility. He should have stopped the beating, but he did it too late. Thus, the great Roberto Duran has won the title in the third weight class. It's interesting that exactly 11 years ago in the same arena in New York, Duran won his first championship belt. And now, many years later, when he was already considered an old fighter, he was back on top. The glorious career of Hands of Stone continued. But Davey Moore was never again a champion. He lost his health in that fight. 5 years later, his life was tragically ended. He was only 29 years old. In 1981, the greatest battle in eternal confrontation, Mexico-Puerto Rico, took place in Las Vegas. It is said that the fighter will turn out magnificent if both dance partners are worthy of each other. Well, Sanchez and Gomez are more than worthy. So, 22-year-old Mexican Salvador Sanchez was defending his featherweight title. His record included a fantastic 40 wins, 30 of which were by knockout. Salvador lost just one fight and drew another. His opponent was 24-year-old Puerto Rican Wilfredo Gomez, nicknamed Bazooka. He won all 32 of his fights by knockout. Only one fight was a draw. Gomez was the reigning champion in the super bantam, but this time he was the challenger. On the fight poster was written the precise and eloquent title, Battle of the Little Giants. There are no more perfect rivals, as you could guess. Instantly, the two prodigies made a ruthless war, which everyone was expecting. It was hard to predict that the favorite would be on the canvas in the first round. Sanchez showed who the champion was. Gomez was so shocked, he barely found his way to his corner. But of course, that couldn't break the man everyone called Bazooka. He continued to press, even though he couldn't hit. Salvador was within striking distance and was as dodgy like a viper. At one point, Gomez cornered his opponent, but in a crazy exchange, he missed a much more. You'll notice how sharp Salvador Sanchez's action is. The Mexican was like a spring. His long reach made his attacks fly at bizarre angles. Wilfredo Gomez kept the pressure on. He had to work hard to keep up with his elusive opponent. The highlight of the third round was another exchange when Sanchez had his back against the ropes. During the breaks, Gomez's catmen tried to do something with the bruise, but it was still swelling. Time was another enemy of Wilfredo, because the fight could be stopped at any second. The 5th and 6th rounds were really close and competitive, but the Mexican's machine gun bursts were not in vain. Gomez looked like Winnie the Pooh who was attacked by wild bees, so Wilfredo tried a different tack. He retreated, but it did not work. Salvador did not take the bait. The challenger was back on the offensive, and for good reason. His bazooka finally hit the target. But didn't destroy Salvador. To the dismay of Gomez's fans, their fighter was doomed. His best punch had no effect on Sanchez. The champion's knockout win was a matter of time now. Sanchez went into crusher mode in the 8th round, and after a dozen punches, Gomez was knocked down. he hardly got back upright. But for him, it was over. Thus, Salvador Sanchez retained his world title and inflicted his first defeat on the monstrous knockout artist from Puerto Rico. After the fight, the boxers became friends despite the ongoing feud between Mexico and Puerto Rico. Sadly, a year later, Salvador Sanchez died in a car crash. The boxing world lost one of the most talented gifts, and Mexico lost perhaps the greatest boxer in the nation's history. Let's move to Atlantic City. In October 1991, an unforgettable heavyweight bout was taking place. Undefeated 22-year-old Tommy Morrison, nicknamed the Duke, faced 30-year-old Ray Mercer, who was called Merciless. At stake was the WBO championship belt, which was in Ray's hands. They had old scores to settle. 3 years previously, Mercer had beaten Morrison in the Olympic qualifiers. Ray subsequently became the sole Olympic champion. In the pros, he came quicker to the title, but that didn't help him to become a superstar. Mercer was simply not expected to perform impressively, which can't be said about Tommy. He was called the Great White Hope and was considered a talent of Mike Tyson's level. By the way, Morrison's bout with Iron Mike was a dream match back then. Not surprisingly, on October 18th, analysts expected a fast win for the Duke. Before the fight, Tommy gave credit to his competitor's resilience and courage, but said he would be looking for an early win. In the fight, he immediately proved his ambitions. The Duke carried out several prepared combinations.
Well, Tony Perez shouldn't let an
Morrison, and he followed up with the left.
And confidently won the opening round. Tommy spent a lot of power on every attack, and not all the strikes hit the target. But the challenger confidently won the second round. Especially impressive were the terrible blows to the body. Incidentally, many years later, Mercer said it was the strongest punches he had ever taken.
And there he's using a forearm across the face.
Uppercut to Morrison.
The champion was under heavy fire in the third round. Morrison was throwing the best punches in his arsenal. A hook to the face, a left to the liver, a right to the jaw. Then the real bombing with heavy sledgehammers. By the end of the round, the Duke was giving all his strength, but never broke his opponent.
That was the best punch Mercer's thrown. Chopping right hand.
Looking at Morrison's fatigue, Mercer picked up the pace. The fourth round was dramatic and crucial. Ray was gradually gaining control, while Tommy was breathing so hard it could be heard through the microphone.
Now he covers up from another Morrison assault in the corner.
Fans of the rising superstar were expecting a miracle, but in retaliation, Ray Mercer gave the Duke a merciless execution. What stood out in this situation was the crazed referee Tony Perez, who simply watched Morrison's monstrous beatdown.
And now Mercer on Morrison in the corner, and Mercer's all over him, and Morrison in trouble! And Morrison goes down for the first time in his career!
The battle should have been stopped earlier. Standing knocked out, Tommy received a score of brutal hits to the head, and only thanks to the innate boxer's health, the fight did not turn into a disaster. Merciless Ray Mercer never became a superstar, but left a mark in boxing history, and first of all, by destroying the Great White Hope. Morrison did become a champion and had some high-profile victories, but regrettably, his boxing career and most importantly, his life did not go the way he had envisioned. All boxing fans know Evander Holyfield. Many of us admire the fearless warrior who conquered 2 weight classes. Viewers know his glorious journey in the Royal Division, but Holyfield became a star as a cruiserweight fighter. In July '86, the real deal was facing his first title shot. For the 24-year-old Holyfield, It was only his 12th fight in the pros. He was facing the current WBA title holder, Dwight Muhammad Qawi. The champion was 33 years old at the time. Dwight is a man who is now rarely remembered, although this outstanding boxer is rightly considered a legend of the 80s. Together with Holyfield, they made one of the best fights in boxing history. Small for a cruiserweight, Qawi always worked as an aggressor. He was only 5'45". However, the fighter was not lacking in physical ability and stamina. For his constantly pushing style and skill to grind his opponents, he was nicknamed Camden Buzzsaw. Holyfield had no other choice but to box from a distance, and he did it well. Throwing punches, the contender changed his trajectory immediately, preventing the champ from firing back. The fight went almost 2 rounds in such a rhythm. At the end of the second round, Dwight imposed a short-range fight. Evander's problem consisted in the fact that he was not saving his energy. In one attack, he managed to throw 6 and sometimes a dozen punches.
He's in a war with Dwight Qawi. Holyfield was going for it. He doesn't want to go 15 rounds.
The challenger was quickly tired and had to take a phone box battle. A tired Holyfield was standing by the ropes as Dwight tried to tear him apart.
Big question with him, and he is very, very tired. Qawi has him right where he wants him.
It seemed that Evander would never survive such an onslaught. However, the sportsman got his second win, biting down on his mouthpiece. He stepped into the war. A great moment happened in the 6th round. Evander launched a series of hooks, straight punches, uppercuts, all to no avail. Qawi countered with a successful combination and smiled wickedly.
The Qawi in this fight than the tapes that we watched together. And here's Holyfield. But look there, Al. He missed about 10 consecutive punches. Just when you were talking about it, Qawi got underneath almost every punch.
Starting from the 7th round, the situation changed. Now the champion was tired. Muhammad was still pressing, but he decreased the rate. During the wonderful clash, the boxers were on the verge many times. Nevertheless, nobody fell down. They used every second of their time in the ring. As one hit, the other blocked, and so on for a hellish 15 rounds. A real inferno.
Doing a good job. He is getting around that defensive cover. On a left or right. Evander a little bit hurt right now. Just a little bit stunned. With the jab. Holyfield trying to stand his ground now. Holyfield with experience.
In the 13th round, the fighters got some 3rd or maybe 4th wind. Holyfield threw some fantastic combinations.
Coming in throughout the fight. And Holyfield, as he has, coming out strong in the early part of the round. Teeing off on the head of Qawi. Qawi trying to cover up.
Dwight responded, but his attacks looked less impressive. The remaining 2 rounds were equally fought. As a result, the new champion of the world, Evander Holyfield, celebrated the victory by split decision. He threw 1,290 punches. Qawi threw 1,018 punches. The winner was taken to the hospital where he recovered for a week. His kidneys were killed, and the boxer weighed only 172 pounds. Before the fight, he was 15.4 pounds heavier. The horrible strain could have killed athletes. No wonder Evander considered this fight the toughest of his life. A few years later, Holyfield knocked out Muhammad in a rematch, but it was the first clash that became legendary. Boxing columnists called their bout the best fight of the 80s, and according to many, it is one of the best boxing fights in history, and we fully share this belief. Nowadays, such confrontations are sadly rare. That's why we miss the golden and silver boxing eras. We hope you enjoyed this brief tour of history. Write in the comments what confrontations you remember most of all. And be sure to subscribe to Boxing Classics. We've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up. See you soon.